Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Charlotte Mason Show. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and I'm here for our Charlotte Mason Book Club with the amazing Shay Kemp. Hello, Shay.
Hello.
All right. So we are on chapter 3, which is called The Good and Evil Nature of a Child. That sounds very weighty.
It does. And I have to tell you, I was telling my 10-year-old, she said, "What are you talking about today?" And I just told her that chapter. And she said, she didn't like that. She's like, the good and evil nature of a child. What? I'm like, well, it's good and evil, not just the evil nature. It's both. So.
Yes, right. And I think, we have to realize the time period that Charlotte Mason was writing is very different from our own, right? And the view of children was very low, that they're kind of, best seen and not heard. And you have to kind of train the evil out of them to make them grow up to be somewhat respectable citizens someday.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's one reason I love this chapter is because it is so respectful of the child as a person. Of course, we know that's her principle, but it's respectful of all the parts of a child as a person instead of talking down not only to the child, but about the child. Like you're not talking about kids behind their back and saying how, oh, we just have to make them be good. She really is respectful in the way she discusses children. And it really was different for her time period. And sometimes our time period too. I mean, I think, we tend to forget how intelligent our children actually are. So.
Well, also too, I think in today's society, we can even go the other extreme, right? Like, well, my child's a little angel and they would never, ever do anything wrong, and it's the world that corrupts them, that they're born little cherubs and then they learn these things, we have to protect them from ever being exposed to anything, rather than, her view was that, children have both capabilities. It's what we do through their education and through the atmosphere of our home that can lead their propensity towards either one of those. But again, they have the free will. She's not going against like our religious kind of teachings, that, depravity or free will or any of that, but that, and all of us, even as adults, we have a choice, right? To train our will, to train our habits, to make decisions right or wrong. And so we have the same responsibility, but also opportunity to do that with our children as well.
Yes, it's so powerful. The things that she says in here, I feel like I underlined so much in this chapter and marked things to go back to later on. So.
All right. So she starts out here kind of giving that contrast I was saying about, and then some of the psychology and theory behind this concept. So what stood out to you from that part?
I think one of the things, there's so much in this to unpack in this first section, but I think one thing that really is practical is where she talks about mother wit and how it's so powerful, and that it's that. I mean, I think it's like that.
You want me to read that quote?
Yes. Why don't you read that? Yes.
Parents have this sort of mother wit more commonly than we outsiders, teachers, and the like. And Charlotte makes it think that because she didn't have her own children. Of course, we know of the mothers and fathers who can't do anything with Tom and hope the schoolmaster will lick him into shape. I mean, how many times have you heard that from people? But how often, on the other hand, are we surprised to see how much more of persons Bob and Polly are in their own homes than at school? Perhaps this is because parents know their children better than do others, and for that reason believe in them more. For our faith in the divine and the human keep pace with our knowledge.
That is so powerful. And that gut feeling, that mother wit, that understanding that we have of our children is what gives us the confidence to teach them, to recognize that we can see what they really are as a whole person, rather than just that maybe when you're just in a classroom, that persona you give off in a classroom, or that way the child interacts in a classroom, you're going to miss out on some of that. And she doesn't discount our faith in the divine and our faith in them as little humans.
It's a partnership there, right? Yeah, it's a trusting of your gut and then trusting to have the faith that God's going to accomplish what he said he would if we are faithful and we're doing our part in this process of educating our children, right?
Yes. And that's so different than just picking a curriculum, which is what I hope people will consider, is that, we get so many questions about, I'm choosing a curriculum. What should I choose? What should I choose for this subject, that subject, this subject? But what we're talking about is so much farther than that, to what does my mother wit and my faith in the divine and my faith in what God puts in my child as a human, what do all those things together, what do they mean that I want my child's education to look like, which is far different than, I'm just going to pick, okay, give me a catalog and I'll pick
Yeah.
this for math and this for, it's far different than that. And it does require, a little more concerted thought process, stepping back and really concerned. But the result of that is that you have this gut instinct, plus the divine that's assisting you. And so when you're moving forward in your school, you have so much more confidence, so much more, I think, forward motion for me. Okay, I have a viewpoint of where we're going. It's not just, okay, can we check everything off today?
Yeah. And I think when you don't have confidence, right, you want a curriculum that just tells you what to do for everything, or even like scripted lessons or something. Like, I just follow this formula and my kids are going to get an education and everybody's going to be okay and they're going to move out of my basement someday. It's like this, we have to follow this to get this thing, rather than trusting in ourselves, right? That God gave you the children that you have because he believed in you and he gave you that responsibility of teaching them, and trusting that what God calls us to, he's going to equip us for. And so that takes so much more confidence. And Charlotte Mason saw this too. I mean, people would write to her all these questions all the time, and I mean, if you want to know what Charlotte Mason said, they could actually ask Charlotte Mason, and, or in our day, I think we think, oh, well, this person wrote a curriculum, so they must be an expert, so I should ask them and I'm going to do whatever they say, rather than taking the time to think about it, pray about it, ponder on it, ponder your child, definitely ask thoughts from other parents who are children who are older, or people who are experts in different fields or specialists. I mean, I'm not saying don't do that. That's super important. But at the end of the day, you have to take all that information and you have to be the one to weigh it. And then you have to be the one to surrender it and realize that, no magic formula is going to get you X, Y end result. That you are actually educating a person, and that this is a surrendering faith kind of process.
Yes. And that's just a powerful, and really that theme kind of goes throughout the entire chapter to me, is she's constantly going back to this sort of mindset that she starts with, is that, you can trust. Let's look at our child, like the sections, let's look at their mind, let's look at their intellect, let's look at their affection, let's look at their soul. But at the same time, we're not just throwing something at them to get them to complete a task. We're considering all these things together as we make these choices.
And, it can seem like, oh, well, that's so much pressure. I don't even want, like, I then it's kind of on me, right? But again, we're saying they are born with this propensity towards good or towards evil, right? They're going to make their own decisions. That doesn't all fall on you, but it does fall on you to be faithful in the job that you're called to do.
Right.
And then, she even talks here about, like the effects of a teacher with a strong personality, that, they're not going to be educated unless they have this like amazing teacher. And we can think that too, that, all of this is on me. Like, I have to come up with all these activities and I have to be like super enthusiastic every day. Oh my gosh, it's time for school. So excited.
Yes. Exhausting. And she says the exact opposite of that. I mean, she even says in here, she talks about how, the undue play of the personality of the teacher is likely to suppress and subdue that of his scholars. And how it brings out, it's actually attention that's caused on them. And they hang on her, she says later on, with a parasitic habit that has been formed. And I feel like we have almost flipped that on its head in our own mindset of what education is. It's like if we have this personality that attracts children and is attractive, and we offer attractive, fun activities, then education is happening.
Yeah.
But what could possibly be happening is that entertainment is possibly happening.
No,
but is education actually happening? So
yeah,
it's a
I like
powerful
that
section.
quote that you were talking about with this parasitic habit. It says, "The girl who kisses the chamber door of her class mistress will forget this lady by and by. But the parasitic habit has been formed, and she must always have some person or some cause on which to hang her body and soul." They become dependent on the teacher in this entertainment and this personality and consider that learning. And so when they have a teacher or professor who isn't interesting or exciting, right? Oh, well, I can't learn anything in this class, you know? Or
Right.
what if I want to just go, can I just go learn something on my own? Do I have to have this person teaching me? Am I dependent on another person for to be the fountain of knowledge? Or can I find this information? Am I empowered to go find this information in a book or, today's world, the internet, and learn things because I'm a curious, creative human being?
Mm-hmm. It's so powerful. And I just think the last quote, the last line of this, where it says, "A tendency to this manner of betrayal is the infirmity of noble minds, of those who have the most to give. And for this reason, again, it is important that we should have before us a bird's eye view, let us call it, of human nature," which is sort of what I was trying to say that she gives in this chapter. Is like, let's have a bird's eye view. Let's look down on all what these children are made up, what we are made up of, because I learned exactly the way that she's talking about here too. I mean, I see myself in this chapter.
Oh, yeah.
And let's not betray that. Let's not cause an infirmity of their mind before we, we're causing a sickness before they ever sit down to learn something, because we're providing them all this unnecessary stuff.
Yes. And it really is. I mean, I don't know about like when you taught. I mean, I remember I taught kindergarten. I used to come home and be so tired because I used to tell it was like the Julie show. Like, I mean, I was just on the whole day, and hey guys, you have puppets and you have songs and you have lights. It's like, please listen to what I'm saying.
The puppets and the things you cut out every single night and out of the that have been
we're gonna glue these things and on the paper, and you're gonna learn so much.
Yes. And then the next day you're like, okay, what was this? And it's the blank stare. Like, oh,
I'm like, that took 30 seconds, but that took me 7 hours last night to cut all this out.
My husband still talks about that because when we first got married, that's what I did, was teach kindergarten. And of course, I never came home until 5:30 at night because I had to have my classroom set up exactly right for the next day.
Yeah,
and then, he
all the different stations,
he would cut out
and centers and stuff so that, and that's great. I mean, kids need to play and they need these different things, right? I'm not discounting them in the hands-on activities and those kind of things. Like those are incorporated, especially at the younger ages, right? Those are important for them to explore and have. But in a home, they're going to have a kitchen and dress up clothes called mom's closet, and these things. You don't have to create a child environment like you do in a classroom for them to play and explore.
And it's just backing up to find out what is really going on there. Like, I do those activities with my kids sometimes, and it snowed here yesterday, and we made these big fluffy twisty snowflakes. It was super fun. It didn't tie to a thing. We just did it.
Yeah.
It was so fun. And I love that stuff. And then we ended up reading Snowflake Bentley because we happened to have that book. And like I said, there's snow here. That stuff is great. But my point here that I think is what she's trying to say to some is to say, let's recognize what that is. If it's the personality of the teacher that's attracting the child, is that true learning that's going on?
Right. And I'm sure kids have a great time. And someday they might have a wedding decorating business and they make fun snowflakes for it, right? But in terms of like overall what they're learning from that activity, right? The hand-eye coordination and the dexterity and the fine motor skills, all that stuff, right? Is so important. That's why Charlotte Mason included handicrafts, but she said there was a purpose to these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's fun to do those kind of things here or there. But if you're considering that's their education, because we could take a cute picture and put it
Yes.
on Instagram, you're missing a whole other world, which is the world of ideas, which he said is what children's minds
Yes.
actually need to be fed upon. So let's go into the next section
And
there.
putting too much pressure.
What?
Yes. Sorry.
Well, where
They're
she talks
putting too
about
much pressure on themselves. Yeah.
the well-being of mind.
Okay. So I think she starts out this one with saying, probably this notion has much to do with our neglect of intellect. And even in that, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a good chapter, because she starts talking about what does it mean? What are their minds actually capable of? And I love that she talks in this next section. I don't want to read this entire thing, but she's talking about teaching astronomy. And she says, we teach astronomy. No, we teach light and heat by means of desiccated textbooks, diagrams, and experiments, which last are no more to children than the tricks of white magic. So there's a place for all that stuff. Like, tell us what you really think, Charlotte.
I know.
There's a place for that.
Command of the English language is hilarious, but yes.
It is. But what she's talking about is that is not what is necessary for them to begin to get a hold of it. And I love that I read this just as we were having, snow outside, because she talks about the winter firmament. And then she goes down and says, we give the child a few fit and exact words on the subject, and he has the picture in his mind's eye. Nay, a series miles long of really glorious films. For a child's amazing, vivifying imagination is part and parcel of his intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're reading them these living books and we're giving them something that we don't have to tell them the diagrams, not at an early stage anyway. Now, of course, there's time for diagrams. I mean, I have high schoolers and there's time for all that. But if their imagination has already projected a film of that in their mind, and by the time you get to the diagrams, they actually mean something. It's not just a dry diagram.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. So this is possibly one of my favorite Charlotte Mason quotes of all time.
It says, I know what you're about to read.
As for literature, to introduce children to literature is to install them in a very rich and glorious kingdom, to bring a continual holiday to the doors, to lay before them a feast exquisitely served. So that's where I got the Gentle Feast name from, was from this quote. But I just love the picture that she places before here of that we're putting children in this rich and glorious kingdom. It's a continual holiday. So it's not the personality of the teacher or the puppets or the lights or the songs that are bringing a continual joy and interest to the child, but it's this wonderful literature that they get to have. Now, does that mean your child is going to be at your bedside every morning saying, Mother, please wake up. I am just dying to do school today. I am so excited for this continual holiday. I can't wait to go downstairs and see what feast you've planned for me today. That's never happened in the 15 plus years or whatever I've been homeschooling. So, Shay, has that ever happened to you?
Not once, ever. This is my 18th year, and no, that has never happened to me.
So we think that must mean I'm doing something wrong. If Jimmy goes, I don't want to read that book, this book must be horrible and we should replace it with another one.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm being slightly facetious here because just because, someone doesn't want to do something doesn't mean the purpose of education is not for their entertainment or enjoyment, but we're training their affections. And as more as their affections are trained towards this beautiful literature, the more interested and exciting in it they become.
And I think that's one of the things that we get a lot of questions about. Mm-hmm. So is that, what if they don't love everything we're doing? And that maybe I should be teacher, that I should be involved more, doing more. But she says just above that quote that I knew you were going to read, because I know that's one of your favorites. She says, good teachers know that they may not drown their teaching in verbiage. There's just not a reason to add and add and add our own talk, because it's the books that we want to offer. And the other things will flow from that as we begin to trust what is inside our own children. As we begin to trust that, then they will come up with those things that you're talking about, the activities. They'll come up with those. It will come out because of that film that's in their imagination that she mentions there. It will come out.
And she gives an example. A teacher of age 11 children wrote to her, they can't get enough of Plubica, and there always groans when the lesson comes to an end. So Plubica is part of Plutarch's lives. Plutarch was a historian. He wrote about ancient Romans and ancient Greeks and their lives. And they're very difficult to read, especially today, right? But even in Charlotte Mason's time, they were very difficult to read, very heavy material. But they are exciting, and they give you a glimpse into a different time and a different person. You get to see why people made the choices that they did, for good, for evil. Again, we're talking about this kind of character development here. But, you know, I don't know about you, Shay, but I have had where we were reading Shakespeare and my kids groaned the lesson's over.
Yes.
It does happen often?
Yes.
No, but it does happen where I'm reading something that I think, oh my, or Pilgrim's Progress, you know? I'm like, they're going to hate this.
Yes.
This is so hard. I don't even understand this book, you know? And then they're like, oh, don't stop, keep reading. I'm like, really? Okay.
I think it's amazing some of the very things that I thought would be too difficult, or maybe not even difficult is the word, but too, I guess, deep, maybe, like, you know, maybe the understanding is not just on the surface, have been some of the very
level
things
understanding to read some of these materials. Right.
Yes. And they're like, oh, wow, this is, I'm connecting to this. I'm connecting to this. Or their narrations were better for those things. And I really think it's because it reminds me of pancakes. So hang in here with me. But do you know how, like, if you make pancakes and you feed your kids 1 million pancakes in the morning, mine are going to be starving by 10 o'clock. It's because they love them. They ate a lot of them. They're just going to be starving because pancakes they're just gone. They go in, they're gone. Yeah, but if you give them, like, if I make the bacon and we scramble the eggs with the cheese and I put some, you know, veggies in there and sneak a little bit of spinach and, you know, and I have this well-rounded thing, it may not even look like they're eating as much. But by the time lunchtime comes around, they're like, oh, is it already lunchtime? So because you're giving them something that's real, that's rich, that's meaty, that sticks to their intellectual minds, then what you get from them is that great energy that you get from a really good protein-filled breakfast instead of pancakes, where you eat them and everybody's laying around half an hour later and say, we can't do school because we're tired, you know, because they have the sugar rush and hit and left.
Right.
But until you do that, you don't know that this actually works. If you keep feeding your kids, that you don't know that what she's saying really,
again. We need some more pancakes.
And we just keep feeding these pancakes. And she says right after that explanation, the teachers underrate the tastes and abilities of their pupils.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's what shows here is such, in the books that she chose, the high view that she has of children. That they are capable of chewing this intellectual meat, like the bacon, the example that you gave, rather than just be kind of filled with fluff because, oh, this is all you guys can understand at this age. You know, you can't handle this stuff, you know. It shows her very high view of children here. All right. And then she gives some more examples from, you know, different headmasters from different schools, and kind of talks about how schools were viewing children at her time. What spoke to you from that part?
I think one of the things that she says is that the schools were offering, she says, surprised and pained when visiting elementary schools to find there was nothing in them which could be called a book. Nothing that would charm and enlighten and expand the imagination. And what's interesting is I do some tutoring sometimes on the side, and I often see when I'm tutoring, you know, I'm looking at and this is to public school children. And so I'm looking at some books that they have that are textbooks, and I'm thinking, no wonder you're struggling, because there's nothing in here to charm your imagination, to enlighten it, to expand it. And so that's a great kind of filter. People are always saying, what's a living book? That's a great little filter to give yourself. Like, well, does it charm? Does it enlighten? Does it expand the information? Even if it's about chemistry, there's a way to do that. So that's a great kind of little tidbit there to think about when you're choosing books or looking for what books to choose for your children.
Mm-hmm. It says here, the boys and girls love their school. They like their teachers and even their lessons. They care not at all for knowledge.
Yeah.
Because we're cringing because we've seen that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did it.
Oh,
I mean, I was guilty. I mean, I did it. I'm like, oh, my kids love me and they love to come here and we're having fun. But I did nothing to really further their love of knowledge. I just wanted them to love the school.
Correct. Yes. So she's saying, the talk of the teacher, it kind of produces this mental laziness in a way, because you're not having to do the thinking for yourself. You're not having to chew on those ideas for yourself. You're just waiting for the teacher to tell you kind of what is important and what you need to know, rather than weeding through this heavy material and coming up with the ideas and then narrating, telling them back and making them part of your own knowledge. All right, let's talk about... go ahead.
I was just going to say, she's got a great quote here that I would love to just hit right quick before we read this. And it's on page 54, and I don't know if we have the same copy or not, but it says, it is well we should recognize that the business of education is with us all our lives, that we must always go on increasing our knowledge. And we had a question not too long ago. A mom was really asking that, my kids don't enjoy school. I feel like they're saying, this is not fun. I don't like it. What do I do? And I feel like she says over and over again, this is just one example, is that we model that by always increasing our own knowledge. I mean, we're in cycle 2 right now, learning about the revolutionary period. And the things that I'm learning about and beginning to understand now, and this is the 4th time, right? 4th time I've been through this time period. Yes. 5th time I've been through Revolutionary War period, and I'm still
You're going to write Hamilton next. You're going to write some kind of amazing...
Yeah, did you see me rapping? Yeah. But I'm still learning so much.
Oh, yeah.
And I want my kids to see me increasing in knowledge, and that's and enjoying it. And that's a great way for you to have your children really attached to that mindset that mom is learning, she's enjoying what I'm learning and what she's learning. So I can be that way too. Probably not going to use those words. And it does come through consistency and over time. I've never had a kid come up to me and say, oh, it looks like you're really enjoying learning, Mom. But
I am now inspired to go read a book. Thank you.
Yes. Wow. You mean you're not watching TV and reading a book? I'm going to do that. But they do notice that sort of thing. They do pick it up over time.
Yeah. And then she goes on to talk about one of her most popular quotes here, I think, is habit is a good servant, but a bad master. She's talking about the habits of our mind here, that we want our habits to serve us, not be dictating us. So we're having habits, we're building habits every day. Our children are building habits every day, whether we're being intentional with them or not. So we're either developing bad habits or we're intentionally fostering good habits. So we want them to be our servant. So what do you think or did you find anything interesting here talking about that concept?
Well, I think when we talk about habits, a lot of times people think that we are talking about like I have a habit of, doing 10 push-ups when I get up in the morning, or I have a habit of making the bed. But she also almost refers to them as character traits. So the habit, like the habit of attention, the habit of feeding your mind with ideas and not just, like she says in other places, twaddle. So it's so important for us to really stop and consider what habits are going on in my house. And it's so hard to, a habit's like a stone rolling down a hill, right? Once it gets going, it can be hard to stop it unless you deliberately do that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I don't know about you, but I always love to back up and think about the habits that my children have. Do you? I mean, I like to think about the good habits, but I always love to stop and think, you know, I'm not really sure that I want to consider what we need to address habit wise, but I'm always glad that I do.
Well, I also think too, it's important. It's not just like, does Johnny put his shoes away when he comes in the house? That,
Yes.
in particular, in this section, she's talking about the habits of training our mind, which
Yes. Mm-hmm.
has more of a greater impact on our lives than probably anything else. Is the habits
Right.
of what we think and can we control our own thoughts and behavior. Is huge here. And she goes on, she gives examples of several artists and architecture people here. And then she says, of the means we employ to hinder the growth of the mind, perhaps none is more subtle than the questionnaire. It is as though one required a child to produce for inspection at various stages of assimilation the food he consumed for dinner, which is disgusting, right? I love this picture, right? Like, we try to like get our kids to throw up their dinner to make sure they actually ate it, right? This is what a questionnaire does with a child's intellectual minds that we're feeding. We see at once how the digestive processes would be hindered, how, in a word, the child would cease to be fed. But the mind also requires its food, and we talked about these are the living ideas,
Yes.
and leave to carry on those quiet processes of digestion and assimilation, which it must accomplish for itself. The child with capacity, which implies depths, is stupefied. I just think of Harry Potter there. Stupefied. Anyway. I mean, that's really what we're doing to them, right? With these questions.
Yes, it really is. That's exactly what we're doing.
On the lines. If John's father is Tom's son, what relation to Tom is John? I want to poke my eye with this pencil, right? That's horrible. The shallow child guesses the riddle in scores, and it is by the use of tests of this kind that we turn out young people sharp as needles, but with no power of reflection, no intelligent interest. Ooh!
She says what it is now.
Oh yeah, she's saying like it is.
She does.
Yes.
I feel it. I have seen my children who left home and went to college come back and say, there are kids in our classroom in college who can make an A, but they can't think of genuine thought for themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had these conversations, and especially frustrating to them. One particular class my son was in later on in his college years, and it required this group project thing. And it was a business class it was taken. And he was so frustrated. And the reason he was frustrated is because everybody wanted to do something that had already been done. They wanted to reach you.
Yeah.
Wanted to reach you all this stuff. And he's like, no, we're supposed to they had to come up with this particular certain thing that had to be created, but follow this set of rules. And there was no power of reflection. So they were sharp. They were top of their class. It's the honors class he's in. They were sharp.
Yeah.
But power of reflection was low. And that's that higher level thinking skill. So when we keep giving our kids questionnaires, keep giving them questionnaires. And we get asked so much, where are the worksheets?
Where are the questions? How do I know they're actually learning this?
Yes. And it's because they need to chew their food by them. Leave them alone and let them chew their food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it will come out. But yes, that is some powerful stuff. Like, she's got some zingers in this chapter.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. She ain't missing no words. And it's that power of reflection that they get through that process of narration. They're taking the material, they're having to put it in their own words, they're having to think about, okay, what was actually important? What was interesting? What happened first? What happened next? Those are huge higher level thinking skills compared to just, is Tom John's father or something, like a
Yes, I
recall.
never know those. I'm not good with
You're
those.
so
You
funny.
never know. I'm like, I don't care who John's father is. I'm sorry. I don't.
Ask Tom.
Exactly. Oh my
um,
goodness.
and then she talks about 2 mental habits: imagination and reason. And I love these because I think we can go to one extreme or the other.
Mm-hmm.
That, what place does imagination have in a child's etiquette? Well, that's just silly nonsense stuff. We don't need to go there, right? We
Mm-hmm.
just need the reason. Here's what's right. Here's what's wrong. Here's how science works. And what happens with that is you can learn a lot of information, but in order to comprehend the beauty and the creativity in the world, like you're saying, these projects and think outside the box, you have to have imagination. I think even to have
Yes.
faith, you have to have imagination because
Yes,
you're
you
seeing
do.
what's not there,
Absolutely.
right? So we want to foster that in our children. Um, and she kind of gives this example of that. Do you want to talk about some of those, the imagination and the reason, and how she developed them?
Sure. One of those imaginations, she talks about how it's supplied by all the different things that each person is going to get. So what comes in my imagination is different than what comes in your imagination, even if we read the exact same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then when she talks about reason, she talks about how, once again, a man's reason is his servant and not his master. So I, I love the quote on the next page. I marked this with yes and some big underlines. It says, the only safeguard against fallacies which undermine the strength of the nation morally and economically is a liberal education which affords a wide field for reflection and
Mm-hmm.
comparison and abundant data upon which to form sound judgments. And that's when those things go hand in hand. When you do have to learn what happened in the world. You do have to learn the principles of science. And we're not saying throw that out and read storybooks all day. But when we can present those facts and information to them in a way that catches their imagination, then we have a wide field for reflection and comparison. And the result of that is sound judgment. And which is what we want from our grown children, right? We want our grown children to not have to call mom and say, oh, what do I do about every single thing, when they're grown and on their own. We want to trust the sound judgment that is in them. And so that's why we do all these things through their education. We don't stop providing the imagination even until 12th grade year. We're still providing that imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we also provide those opportunities for reason. So
Yeah.
it's a powerful concept.
She says imagination could be a chamber of horror and dangers, or it could also be a house beautiful.
Yes.
And it's those pictures in the mind, and that comes through what they're reading, like they're picturing here. She's talking about Homer and Shakespeare, through their art, through their music, by putting them in touch with beautiful things, right? Hopefully, they're going to have this house beautiful in their imagination, and not this house of horrors and dangers, right? Because our imaginations
Yes.
can go either way. We're training, again, we have the propensity for either one. We're training their affections. We want to train them towards things of beauty and have those pictures and those ideas in their mind. And then with reason, she says, we see reason in this, but the men themselves confound reason with right.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good point, especially in today's world. It's like, I'm just going to wait for the teacher to tell me what the right point of view is. And then we all have to agree with that point of view. We can't
Yes.
have reason to think differently. And so
Right.
it's by being in touch with these great ideas and narrating and having their own thoughts be expressed and being able to develop opinions, which is really what they're doing, that they can have reason, right? They can articulate what they're thinking. They don't have to wait for, okay, well, what's the right answer? What's the right point of view here? I'm just going to go with what everybody else is doing in this kind of groupthink mentality.
Yes. And I don't know if you've ever been in a group setting where you read and have narrate to children who are not used to narrating, but I do find, yeah, and what I see is the ones that are not used to narrating, they're looking to the other ones. They're looking around to see who's going to say what the right answer here is. instead of, oh, okay, I remember this, I see this, this is my takeaway, because you can see that muscle's been really um strengthened. And I don't know if it's okay if I'm gonna read this last sentence of that section. It
Mm-hmm.
says, it is no small part of education to have seen much beauty, to recognize it when we see it, and to keep ourselves humble in its presence. And
Yeah.
that's why we keep putting beauty in front of our children, so that they will recognize the humility that comes when we recognize something beautiful. We have that sense of awe. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Look at this. We looked at snowflakes yesterday, um, online, that somebody had put, Snowflake Bentley had put
Mm-hmm.
captured, and the awe in that little snowflake, and then to understand the science behind it. That's how
Mm-hmm.
beauty and reason come together. The beautiful of that just captures our mind, and we start thinking, okay, what are the principles behind it?
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. Because right before that, what you just said, it says the function of the sense of beauty is to open a paradise of pleasure for us. But what if we grow up admiring the wrong things? Or what is
Mm-hmm.
morally worse, arrogant in the belief that it is only we and our kind who are able to appreciate and distinguish beauty? So,
Yes.
um, so now we're going to kind of talk about, well, I guess that's the next section, the misdirected affections. Before she gets to the misdirected affections, she talks about intellectual appetite. So just like our bodies need food, our minds are fed upon ideas. What struck out to you in that section, Shay?
I think the quote that I love, a couple of them, but the first is, it says, we make due use of this natural provision for the work of education. And the things you and I were discussing before, that we're putting so much pressure on the teacher, or our teachers
Mm-hmm.
put on themselves as parents. And she discusses in this whole next section about emulation every child has. I want to be first. I want to be first. I want to be the best, and we use that as a motivating factor. And then we
Mm-hmm.
give them prizes and scholarships and all these incentives that we give them. And we tell them to work for our approbation, she says, and play on their vanity. And then we say, well, what's the problem with that? I mean, why not? But the issue is that it's not necessary.
Right.
And it's taking away from their natural provision for the work of education, which is the desire to know, that
Mm-hmm.
that inner curiosity that each
Yeah.
child has.
Mm-hmm.
And she says in this other passage, I mean, I got to admit, this was me, especially in college. It says, boys and girls cram to pass, but not to know. They do pass, but they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The divine curiosity, which should have been an equipment for life, hardly survives early school days.
Yeah, and studies have shown that, right? What's the book? Alfie Kahn, Punished by Rewards, how rewards and actually incentivize us to do less and less.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my daughter had speech, and so the speech office was off the library in elementary school, and I was sitting in there waiting for her to come out, and the teachers were having a meeting, and they were trying to come up with the prizes that they were going to give for this reading program that they had. If they read so many um, books and took these tests online and got so many certain points, what would they get, kind of thing. And they're all debating, well, is it going to be enough if they have like popsicles, or should we have pizza? And like this whole complicated system of all these rewards to try to get the kids to want to read. And I just wanted to like stand up and scream, like, no, you're teaching them to not want to read. The motivation goes away when someone's taking that agency away from you, rather than
Yes.
I'm an intellectually curious human being. We are born that way. We are born with this appetite. And then feeding that appetite through nursery rhymes and rich literature and wonderful picture
Yes.
books. Then I want more of it.
Yes.
Our appetites are
And
more
even if
stimulating.
you're right. And she says here, even she says, prizes and places, praise, blame, and punishment are unnecessary
Mm-hmm.
insofar as they are used to secure ardent interest and eager work. The love of knowledge is sufficient. And of course, we understand that she talks about, we do need to provide the stimuli. It's important. We're not saying that, just throw books at your kids and let that be enough, but it's the whole picture that you're talking about that, if we start treating our children like they are capable of learning and they have this innate curiosity, then that is enough for them. It says, in the schoolroom, without doubt, the titillation of knowledge itself affords sufficient stimulus to close attention and steady labor. Mm-hmm. So when we offer them knowledge opportunities, true knowledge opportunities in these books, and I don't want to, I think sometimes when we talk about beautiful picture books and great stories and all that, I had a friend who has all boys, and she said, I can't do Charlotte Mason because that's all just like fairy tales and all these, girly books. And all this. I'm like, no, I mean, I have children that are very engineering minded. And there's so much there that's for that. It depends. You just give them what their mind needs, and their mind will take away from it. You just give them the rich literature, the rich books. You don't have to give them stickers.
I am thinking we still have half this chapter left. It's been 45.
You want to do the rest of it, and let's split it.
Yeah, I think we should split this because I think this.
I think that sounds good to me.
That sounds good to you? Okay, so we're going to wrap up the first part of chapter 3. So if you haven't read the second part, you can go do that before listening to the next episode here, because again, there's a lot. She packs a lot into these chapters, doesn't she? Yes, she has a lot to say.
A lot of good stuff.
But this is such a foundational concept here that I don't want to rush through some of this. So we will stop for now, and you'll catch you all later with the next part of chapter 3. So thank you, Shay.
Thanks, it was fun.